All right, welcome everybody. This is Youngstown's Talk Channel. Getting about a 20-minute late start. I was kind of holding out that the MLO Bros would show up, but they didn't. They truly take advantage of not working. Me, on the other hand, I'm OCD and I like my regimen. So at least making an appearance and saying good morning to you post holiday. I see the parking lot is about, I don't know, 75% empty. So, you the working public out there, and this is an annoyance of mine, so I'm going to rant about it. When Christmas is on like a Wednesday or Thursday, why do we carve out and make the day before and the day after a non-productive day? And I know some of you work think like, the marketplace is going to be okay. This fallout of productivity, doesn't hurt anybody. But sometimes it does. So sometimes the dependence on having, 240 work days a year that gets carved out by this, I don't know, desire to just not work. When we get to AI and we have a threat that is willing to work and do valuable things, that competition is going to right this bad logic. And I don't necessarily think that that if today was a work day that anybody would get much value anyway. So you might as well take the day off and sit around and eat more cheeseburgers. But it's just an annoyance to me that we're just waiting for a reason not to go, fulfill our purpose. And maybe that's the problem. Maybe all of you working out there that decided to take the day off today just don't have purpose big enough to think that, you matter enough, and you're missing an action, is going to affect no people. And maybe that's the best reason to have AI fill those voids. If nobody notices that you do or do not show up today, maybe you don't matter enough to even have a job in the first place. So AI taking your spot, no big deal. So anyway, we're just right off the bat, that, just my feelings. And I've always said this, and it's unpopular, and I get a lot of pushback from most people, but it's just factual. And so, let's talk about Christmas is I'm a big fan of history, and the story of George Washington on Christmas, embarking on a battle on a day where, most people would be chilling, right? They would not be ready to fight a war on a holiday. But George Washington, he was a badass, and he went and conquered a couple of divisions on Christmas Day. And also let's get into the weekend with Donald Trump and what happened in Nigeria, because this is a little concerning to me. Libertarian Joe and interventions in other parts of the country concern me, because I think they have a habit of, sort of like drawing us into things that are unnecessary, controlling the world and controlling what other people do. And I think we're too involved in too many places that gives us too much exposure to things. And whether or not it be, Venezuela versus Nigeria, when in your house, which affects your community more? Drug imports that are killing your neighbors with fentanyl poisonings, or terrorist attacks in Nigeria? And I believe that we need to take care of the home front first, and things that affect us directly. And that doesn't mean that I want terrorist groups to get strongholds and be too big to conquer, keep them in check while they're small. And that's fine. We've got operations that don't have to have a constant presence, and maybe you have an embassy, but you don't have, you're not in a constant war footing in some of these areas. I say, let these shitholes fend for themselves and come to the conclusion, if they don't have Big Brother saving their asses every time they do dumb things, let them implode. And then after they've destroyed themselves, I'm not going to name the person, but in Youngstown in the 90s or late 80s into the 90s, it was drug haven. It was dangerous. There was crime everywhere. And you didn't want to, stop at a stoplight going down Market Street at certain times of the day. And so the the deal was, and I don't know if it was policy of law enforcement, but it was like, if the gangs and drug dealers are want to be violent, let's let them be violent with themselves, kill themselves off. And by the time we get to it, they have weakened each other to the point where maybe, we start intervening. But if the if the people who live there don't care enough to fight for it, let them move to places that aren't as violent. Let it be ruled solely by, the gangs. Let them do what they're going to do, and then we'll mop it up after the damage is done. And it might be, it might be a little heartless to find out, but if you have gangs and you have violence and you have lawlessness that is being tolerated, right, and accepted, it's part of a culture. And it, in a civilized society, there should never be lawlessness as an accepted part of the culture. If I lived in a house and I found out that the house next to me was a drug house, would I just tolerate it? Or would I rally the troops and police my own neighborhood to make sure that was expelled and known that that was not accepted to be in our neighborhood? And I would take it personally. But the more we offload our responsibilities to government and agencies to protect us, the worse off we are. If they were legitimate Elliot Ness type of agencies where you had the the noble sacrificial archetype, then that's fine. But these bureaucracies create industries around that peril. Everybody gets wealthy as long as that thing exists, and it never goes away. Why do you think terrorism always exists? Why do you think drug dealers really exist? Because things become corrupt. People make enough money and justify their existence because of it, and it's allowed to perpetuate. And that's what I disagree with. I think good people need to stick together, move to areas, and really, just agree. We have to have a standard of agreement, what is acceptable and what is not, and be vigilant to keep those things at bay. And I don't think we do that. I think we like to blame government for all of our woes. And then you talk to government and look at what government's doing. And do they really not want that thing to be? Or do they profit handsomely to be a politician and always be able to say Social Security is going bankrupt and pharmaceuticals are, compromised and they're tyrants in other countries and whatever. So that's why the libertarian approach to me, I will isolate our country from being involved in things that don't directly affect us. If we do any surgical reactions, it is heavy, like what was that dude's name that got shot by the shotgun? Dick Cheney, right? So, was it Norman? I don't know. During the 90s, you had, bombing them with intensity, get in, get out, get the job done, and go home. And that way, your enemies kind of know that you don't mess around. And if they piss you off to a certain point, you're going to bomb them, but you're not going to engage in a full-out war with them. You're going to hurt them as much as you can in the shortest period of time as possible, and then you're gone. And I think Trump has this advantage that I think that our enemies feel he's very erratic. He will blast you in the kneecaps in 2 seconds if you piss him off. And I think that kind of fear, outgoing, knowing that he will do it, but he's showing restraint that he doesn't want to do it, is enough. And so if these examples of hitting in Nigeria are enough to say, okay, everybody's going to settle down, and those saber rattlers aren't going to use the strategy of every time that they misbehave, they get paid off something. Like, I don't think our diplomacies pay North Korea to be a good neighbor. I think it's you F around, you're going to find out, and you're not only going to be poor because you're, that those subsidies are going to dry up, but also you're going to be, infrastructure is going to be devastated because you pissed off Trump. And he has that going for him. But again, that part of the world, what happened this weekend concerns me because that feels like a draw in something bigger. It's not a send 5 bombers and, hit some nuclear sites with some bunker busters. This is a, get the warlords all enraged, and we're going to see fronts of 7 battles where we're going to spend the next 2 decades spending taxpayer money fruitlessly. If you want any example of fruitless wars, look at Afghanistan, Iraq, and find out how many billions, if not trillions of dollars were spent, and how much improvement those tax dollars got us. And I would say none, because we don't. When you have accepted violence in a community, and I would say downtown Youngstown was accepted violence, Afghanistan is accepted violence. If the people of the community aren't willing to fight it, why should an outside source come in and risk their treasure and their lives to fight for something the people aren't? So it should be sort of the new policy that if the Afghans are so pissed off that they don't want this extremism going on, and a million of their militia are fighting, we'll back you. We'll be the bombs behind you. You're fighting the front line. If you're not going to fight for it, you better believe we're not going to fight for it. And let our special operations hit the stuff that threatens us directly. Have our spies in every country figuring out information and collecting intel. But you keep American lives out of the equation. You keep my tax dollars out of the equation. I think Nigeria is a bad development, or a concerning development, as far as Joe sits here. All right, welcome everybody. Angelina says facts, and there's a lot of people, especially I think the libertarian movement is more strong than it has been in my lifetime. Yes, we have a lot of dingbats. We have a lot of conspiracy theorists. We have a lot of people who are in left field a little bit and makes that movement hard. But I think I call myself a libertarian not as a political tribe, but just basically where you would plot me on the ideological scale. And I have some conservative tendencies. I have some liberal tendencies. And I am not the architect or the engineer of how things go on. I just share my opinion of what mathematically makes sense and where we should go from now. Like, taxes, for instance. You have libertarians who say there should be no taxes whatsoever. And let's just say you had your way and you just put all taxation from everything. How would you pay for stuff that you didn't even realize your taxes were going to? I think it would solve 75% of the problem, but I think you'd have 25% regret. So it takes attrition pushing in a direction where we have less taxation and less frivolous, corrupt spending. And you get to a point where it's a little more tolerable until you get to a point where we know what our discretionary is, right? And we know what is 100% legitimate needed spending. But a politician, if you expect a politician not to see the trough of money you're willing to part with and find a billion uses for it that you would not agree with, then you're a dummy. And so you want to keep starving them, even if the parts are legitimate. I saw a chart the other day about Doge and cutting USAID. I've had many arguments with people about the devastations of cutting USAID, the deaths, the food destruction. And I blame, and as from day one, I've blamed the people who corrupted the system, not the person who cleaned up the system. So in this case, USAID, NGO. So NGOs were invented because government is not allowed to do certain things. So politicians are like, well, how do we do things we're not allowed to do? And libertarians would say, you don't, and it's not your purview. You let the private markets do it. And they're like, no. We can influence the, some private agencies, and then we can fund these private agencies, and then the private agencies can do stuff that we're not allowed to do. So thinking back, why would a government agency not be allowed to do something? Why? Because number one, out of jurisdiction. It's not what they were devised. It's not their intention. They can't do it because of that. Number two, you'd create conflict of interest. People trying to prosper out of the money being spent in government. And number three, you have the accumulation of power. If I can get government NGOs to support causes through lobbying and direct payments, then I can grow my political party. And you watched NGOs do all three of those things, do things that government shouldn't be involved in. We watched people get billions of dollars in money to financially prosper. And you watched Democrats become extremely powerful because of the money that was being spent. So you roll up to common, modern day today, and you take in consideration that you've got a bastardized program that does 25% good, 75% bad. Somebody's got to be the bad guy that comes along and says, okay, it's so corrupt and the threads are so entangled in legitimate things. Let's shit can the whole thing. And if there was any real value to people, let's just reinvent that, but with bigger rules that say we don't have to blast 75% of bad money to get 25% of good money. But the downside of that is because you've created dependence on voters and people that live in those communities, they became dependent on that money. And so their life was revolved around getting something that somebody else was giving them. You cut that off, they're going to have a bad day. Now, you could argue that they shouldn't have ever been there, but they are. They trusted the government. The rules were set out. They prospered the way that was legal, and they didn't go to jail for doing it. And that's when we had all those discussions about NGOs. They were smart people. It was probably all above board and legal to do. The problem was there weren't enough laws to rein in those NGOs. And so, again, it was a broken system that was fraught with corruption and fraud. And so, yeah, that's if I were the engineer, now, first of all, I would not want to be the engineer to fix those programs. And in fact, I might say there's too much cancer to save the organ, and I would probably cut it out. But at the same time, I would have some people looking through and say, what's the real legitimate side of this, and see if we can find somebody to at least fill that void before I cut it out. And that would have had way better optics. Probably hard to put together, but when my critics and the people I'm arguing with say that USAID was feeding someone, and because you cut that program, we had 100,000 food that could have fed 100,000 people rotting on a dock, I would say that's a huge waste, and probably not as big as the 75% of the waste that was happening that was going to politically motivated people that would just send money back to the Democrats or Republicans. But still, that cabbage that's rotting right now didn't get on someone's plate. And that, is pretty tragic as far as I'm concerned. But I still originally blame the people who corrupted the programs, not necessarily the people who decided to cut it out. More so. I blame both of them, but I would say more so the people who corrupted the system. And I'd really like to know their names. All right, second news item that came out over Christmas is some videos. And these were pretty interesting videos of, I think it was Michigan that I was watching, where there were poll workers who were taking ballots and putting them in book bags and pocketing them. We had military votes that were 100% Biden, 0 Republican votes. And if you ever question the integrity of elections, immediately you'll have people, ideologically captured people, that will say fraud doesn't happen, right? And that's asking you to believe that anywhere you go that it should be everybody of integrity. You have to make the argument that everybody that's on those board of elections and those poll workers and those voters, nobody's trying to do nefarious things, right? And that's number one, not only improbable, that is not a reality that we all live in. And the second part of the argument was, okay, I know human nature. I know people are going to try to cheat because that's what people are. I know that people are going to have bad days and they're, captured. Like if you have 60% of the poll workers, they're all liberals and they want Joe Biden to win. And if they can grab a stack of Trump ballots and put them in the dumpster that way, fine. We know that's probably happening. But what is your defense mechanism? How are you defending against that? So you're not going to eliminate fraud within elections, but can you mitigate it? Can you make the public feel better that at least we have things in place that make it super hard or really less likely? And in Ohio, I trust Ohio probably more than most states. You don't really hear problems in Ohio because of how these things happen, how they devise poll watchers, and uh, how the systems have oversight, and how they have audits, and where if they have problems, they're able to find them. And I think the way that Biden exploited the COVID year with voting was the mail-in, the drop box ballots, the ballot harvesting. And nobody wants elections to go down where you're stacking the polls. Every election has people that are really motivated to leave their house and vote. You have some elections that would vote, but probably not real motivated. What helps the Democrats when we make it so unmotivated people still have a way of casting their vote. And in a free, fair system, like, it would be mandatory that just poll everybody, not pick a select few and make sure that they have a higher margin of votes cast than anybody else. So the perfect remedy is make it mandatory that you vote. You have 350 million people. Everybody is required, like selective service, by November to cast their ballot. Use the penalty of law to make sure that there are 350 million votes in those boxes. And then we have no problem that everybody freaking voted. It's unanimous. But just like gerrymandering takes advantage of certain demographics for voting power, you could have methods that benefit one political party over the other. So you got to have sort of like unbiased processes that don't give one political party an advantage. But again, I blame the Republicans just as much as the Democrats, because if the Democrats did something that was completely legal, why don't the Republicans do the freaking same thing? And the 2024 election was sort of the same, sort of like the same strategy that the Democrats used. Republicans just used it and they did it better. But nobody feels after that gamemanship is being played that it's a real authentic election. But Republicans have the House, Republicans have the Senate, Republicans have the executive. And if fraud in elections were a big deal, you would think that there would be tons of legislation and shoring up that system. If you truly believed it, if that was the number one reason you didn't win in 2016, and you would be damn sure that was corrected if you're going to complain about it. And we didn't see a whole lot of election integrity legislation coming down the pike. But after this Christmas video release of Trump taking some individual video captures of people obviously taking ballots off the table, maybe the next couple of weeks we're going to see some election integrity legislation, or at least a temperament change on how important or not important that really was for things. So they got their budget. The Unaffordable Care Act stuff is set to expire in what do we got now? 5 days. So the subsidy for some people who are benefiting from that disappears. So we're going to see the legislature, when they come back, dicking around with that, maybe another government shutdown. But before midterms, you better have your stuff together. For certain, if you haven't gotten the economy rolling, if you haven't got the voter policy, the national voter policy, the state voter policy mess. I mean, he's got to be talking to governors right now and saying, get this moving in your legislature, because if you don't take it serious and you scream to high hell when you thought fraud was going on and you didn't do anything about it, that's going to look really bad of how sincere that charge and accusation was, that the election wasn't legitimate. So as an observer, as an unbiased person, I'm willing to hear that there's far too much fraud in elections that I'm comfortable with. And I see politicians that don't give two shits about it. The Democrats want it to be fraudulent. The Republicans want it to be fraudulent so they can keep saying those things and keep the dollars coming in as people are pissed off. And that's the tragedy. You would expect that if there was a problem to be solved, that they would want to solve it. But if your consultant tells you that you're going to raise $2 billion if it's still a problem, what incentive do you have to actually solve the problem? You and I would solve it because it makes people's lives worse than it exists. but you're not a politician. You don't think that way. As if you made it better, you would actually make your prospects of power and purpose worse. And you got to think like a politician to know why they do dumb things, and that's definitely one of them. Joanne says, I get what you're saying, that everyone being required to vote, that's a bad idea. I'm all for everyone having the opportunity. I worked in elections over 20 years, and trust me, some people should not vote. I've seen people color in every oval. Should that person vote? Probably not. Of course, that's considered an overvote and doesn't get counted. Well, using that same logic, if there is a requirement where, do you want every voter or do you want every informed voter? Do you want quality voters? Do you want people voting on things like taxes that from people who don't pay taxes? Should you be able to qualify, and who would you trust to qualify voters? So this is the Wild West of voting right now, where we don't qualify voters. You don't have to have a certain IQ, or you don't have to have a certain amount of money invested in the economy. You don't have to be a landowner. You don't have to have a certain value in your community, and your vote is equal to those who are the takers. What happens when you get 51% of the people who only want to vote for people who give them more stuff? That's how you have the breakdown of the United States of America, when the coffers are open as gifts to people who will vote a certain way. If you made it so that everybody had to vote, yes, you would have a lot of really uninformed votes in there, but would it be better than having curated votes in there? Which would you trust more? And I know this is sort of like the best of two evils here. And in a perfect world of utopia, we're beyond that. We don't get utopia. Utopia will never exist for us. It's going to be a matter of having attrition. If it swings too far in one direction, then we have to have pressures that pushes it back. So we have to know how much fraud we're willing to deal with. If you had, I remember I fraudulently voted for a NASCAR driver one time, right? This was probably mid 90s sometime, and they used to vote for certain drivers to have camera and telemetry that was broadcast on the internet. And I had a favorite NASCAR driver, and so I set up a pool of 7 computer systems that would vote continuously. I added millions of votes for my driver. Well, there are people out there that can outsmart the system, and absolutely, I was so happy because my driver got telemetry and whatever. I won, right? But was it fair? Was it really Joe having a million votes and everybody else who just voted one time? Did I not just minimize the shit out of their vote? And so that's sort of what we have happen here when we have this muling and canvassing for certain parties. If the Democrats go out and canvass and get more people registered to vote and even taking absentee ballots, aren't we really we're working the system? Because I devise it where I want the most motivated people to go out, get in their car, sacrifice some time, and go to the polls. Whatever motivates people directly. I want to motivate people who would have voted anyway. I don't want to take the vote of people who absolutely would have stayed home and watched SpongeBob that day, right? And that's simply what you have when you have this canvassing that is allowed to happen. Jen says there's too many stipulations and details attached to each one that are too complicated for most to understand. As if one has to go hire a lawyer just to make sense of what they're voting in. Yeah, I think the worst thing that we could have done legislatively is when you take those omnibus. I was actually in a meeting with politicians. They were putting a budget. This was the state of Ohio. And the first portion of the legislation was devised simply on what was passable, right? The sticking points of the bill. So it wasn't like, here's a thing, let's see how people feel about it, up or down, vote for it. It was like they crammed enough things into one bill that would make it tolerated by the people who are voting. And then the second session was, what could we cram in here that won't undermine the bill's passage, but will then give monetary rewards to people? infrastructure builds and contracts and stuffed with those bills. And there's literally too much in there for anybody to read. They don't read it themselves, and we know that they don't read it. And so you get these big pieces of legislation. They call it pork. I don't even want to call it that anymore. It's just fraud. It is fraud. Like if you were writing a home loan contract, like you were buying someone's house, and you were like, I know they're not going to read all this thing on page 4. I'm going to put XYZ in there. When they read that you asked for, something that you got them because they didn't read it, would you not feel shafted? Would you not feel like they snuck it in on you? When I'm having a negotiation, we're doing a business deal. It takes a couple months, and we hammer out every facet. That's one contract with one company where you create a cooperation agreement between two people. And we talk about things like revenue, like inventory, like business practices, like labor, like marketing. And then we get down to the immediate stuff, like or the administrative roles. We talk about who's in the positions of power, who's setting policy. We talk about the founders and the people, what's important to the company. We talk about who's got the highest risk potential, who's got a gambling problem, who's doing drugs, who just got divorced. We talk about all the things that can bite us in the ass if we go into this agreement. So at the very end, we have ferreted everything out. I think the government is working on things too many things that don't matter. I think if all they stuck to was spend every day, I don't even think they should meet with constituents anymore. I don't think they should break. I don't think they should have sessions where they go home and talk to constituents. There's so much shit that they need to work on. They need to put bills together that they actually talk about every line item, vote for it. And if they don't get everything done, F it. I don't care. If you don't, have lesbian dance basket weaving in Nigeria, if you never get to that one, I'm completely fine with that. We have too much shit that actually needs attention, and we're making it more lazy, not less lazy. When you do those Omni ones, right, it's good because you get a bunch of stuff done at all one time, so they can take 40-day vacations, while the rest of us who go to work every day are watching politicians who are making a good buck better than us have a really easy life. And we're fighting harder to make their jobs even easier and have to do less. So yeah, I'm absolutely with you that the complication is not a bug, it's an actual feature, and they're using it to pass a lot of things that we never see, they never read, don't even know about until one special interest gets to take advantage of a line that was in a budget that nobody even freaking knew was there. It's incompetency, and government and incompetency are synonyms as far as I'm concerned. So anyway, back to the election fraud. We'll hope over the next couple years or a couple months leading up until probably July that if they're really going to take it serious and do something about it, it's going to happen over the course of the next session coming into January. But there again, I want to just ready you all, spoilers. When they come back into session in January, it's going to be nothing but Affordable Care Act and the subsidies. And, as we talked about on with Kellen last week, not last week, today's not Monday, today's Friday. We talked about it on Wednesday. The reason the last shutdown happened was because the Democrats wanted the Affordable Care Act to be jammed in with the approval of the budget. And the ask was that pass this budget and we'll compromise. We'll talk about this. We'll get this thing wrapped up. And when that thing closed out and they couldn't come to an agreement on the thing that they said if you passed the budget that we would at least talk about. I mean, you watch C-SPAN. Did you see them talking much about the Affordable Care Act? I mean, I saw three things. I saw one, the Democrats marketing for how much costs are going to go up for consumers who pay premiums. And then I saw a left field idea about a health savings account giving money directly back to people, neither of which solve any kind of problems. There's not even middle ground between the two. Because number one, if you give money directly to the consumer, they're just going to give it to the insurance company. So it's no different than a direct payment. It's not like they're going to spend it more vigilantly. They're just going to pay their premium with the money that the government sent, and it's no different than the other way around. So that wasn't a, true compromise. And just continuing to pay subsidies and allowing insurance companies to boost their rates, with those new subsidies, that wasn't going to fix anything. That was going to be good for the consumer, but terrible for the cost of insurance. So nothing really happened. Just two arguments that we knew were going to happen anyway. January 1st is the first day that subsidy ends, and now costs are going to go up for people. We're going to spend the next month hearing about, individual. My cost went from $12,000 to $30,000, and pushing everybody to Medicare for all, because that's what Joe thinks is absolutely going to happen. I think okay, Medicare for all, no stipulations, just more of the same. Just make it free healthcare, and then costs aren't going to go down. Medicare is just going to go bankrupt, and that's not a good solution. In Joe's eyes, I believe that Medicare should not be a buffet. Medicare should be services that are catastrophic, things like cancer, car accidents, broken legs, that kind of stuff, all in Medicare, because can't do anything about the personal choices and behaviors. That's just going to be covered. Take those people out of the system. Insurance companies don't need to be devising. Segment out. Let's just say it's 75-25. 25% of the people, pre-existing conditions and whatever. So segment out and take care of those people differently. So you take the argument away from the Democrats that the reason that we need single payer is because of the catastrophic events. Field them out with Medicare. We'll figure out how to backfill and pay for Medicare for the people who just can't help it. Everybody else is on a different system. Take the other 75% of the people and make it a true insurance program. High risk equals high premiums, right? Not across the board. I'm not subsidizing other people's bad life choices. I'm going to fund my personal profile with what risk I am to getting a disease, getting into an accident. So if I live I want to go extreme hiking and rappelling down a cliffside, that's a higher risk that I fall and break my legs, or get put in a coma or even die, right? I'm a high risk. So I do those things. My insurance company says, hey, if you want to do those things, it's going to cost you another $400 a month. And I say, okay, well, I either want to do those things or I don't want to do those things. I want to pay more or I don't want to pay more. I don't expect the person that's not going extreme climbing or extreme hiking or rappelling down cliff faces to pay for my increased liability. I want to make the choice. If I can afford to make those choices that aren't, mandatory in living, then I can pay more. So if you want to eat Ding Dong's fried chicken and sweets all day, that's cool. You get a letter in the mail that says, hey, your biometric scanner said that your glucose levels are super high, and you must be eating really terrible food. If you want to continue doing that, you cool with $600 more per month in premiums, because now you have bigger heart risk, bigger diabetes risk. Your risk of dying went up because of your food choices. And if you want to pay $600, you can continue doing it. But if not, let's cut that shit out and we'll lower your premium. And then insurance companies using technology and AI can assess each individual based on their behaviors, right? Not just self-proclaimed behaviors. You ever go through a life insurance policy and they ask you a series of 1,000 questions? I'm probably the only dude on this planet that answered all of those questions honestly. Because every time they ask me a question, I'm thinking, I bet you everybody else lied about that. Hey, do you smoke? And even if you smoke, you're like, is that going to raise my rate if I say that I smoke? No, I don't smoke whatsoever. And they're just like, oh, cool, I believe you. And they check that box and you got a lower premium. Even though you smoke, even though you're carrying a higher liability, now you're going to pay less. And guess who pays the difference? The people who don't smoke, because it's shared. This risk pool is shared by all of us. So if you lie and you have bad choices, I pay more money. That's not fair to me. And so again, we took the catastrophic, the things people that can't be helped. We have a list of things that people can't help. We put them all in that basket, put them on Medicare for all, and they're all taken care of. We'll just pay for them. They're the charity cases of our civilization, and we're all cool with taking care of the people who can't take care of themselves. But everybody else gets treated differently, and we're more judgmental with what people do. So the start of removing sugary snacks from SNAP, right, is the sort of like the merge, the entryway to the freeway of getting to something that judges people and the decisions they make as to far what their risk categories are. You know, all of us were teenage drivers. I grew up with having girls that were friends of mine. And one of the big obstacles to me as a 16-year-old boy was that my insurance was going to be more than my parents were willing to pay. And I looked at friends that were the same age, that behaved the same way that I did, that they did the same shit that I did, almost in the same risk category that I did, pay less money, and they got their driver's license before me. Why? Because lazy categories for insurance companies said that if you're a boy, you were automatically a higher risk in a higher risk category, and you had to pay more. Well, how much would I have liked to broken out and say, I'm safer. Look at my category. Your categories suck. You're costing me more when I'm literally not in the category that you're charging me with. Now, everybody who is in that category that's getting a break because they're part of it, they don't care. They don't mind at all. It's so long that there are more unjust people categorized, at least we have a voice. But as soon as we get to the point where there's more takers than givers, it's a done deal. You won't have enough people objecting enough to make a difference. Jen says, so if we live a healthy lifestyle or not, how could that be reported to the insurance companies? Doctors' notes, how would those be made official? Do people so people aren't cheating? Well, that's where AI comes in, right? Having, getting your social credit score going today probably is a good thing. So when you go to the grocery store and you use your Giant Eagle card and you have your biometric rings, like, you're telling on yourself. You're basically telling the government what you buy for your family to eat, what you do. You pay for your drinks with the credit card. They know how much alcohol you drink, and your biometrics say what THC is in your body and how much hemoglobin levels and oxygenation levels and all of that. So AI can just tell on you, and you don't have to take a quiz and tell on yourself. Your biology will tell on you. Your cars will tell you what your speed limit is. So, Tesla has all these computers that craft telemetry, and it's local, and it also sends it out to an insurance company. So you can buy Tesla insurance. The car will tell Tesla insurance what your driving profile is like, how much you speed, if you do hard braking, if you do, quick takeoffs from a red light, whether or not you make aggressive merges and turns. And so it's telling the computer system whether you are a safe, slow, methodical driver or you're an erratic, fast, aggressive driver. And the one profile should definitely cost less. And if there's an incentive to drive safer or eat healthier or exercise more, and it costs you less money, they'd have more people with an incentive to join those groups. So it's less about paying attention to those gaining the system and more about giving liberties to people who are willing to give up information to prove that they are following the rules and give them primary advantage. Give huge punishments to people who don't follow the system and give major incentives for people who do. And so, yes, there will always be cheating, just like in fraudulent elections. And part of human nature is that if you can game the system, you do. And you just have these pressures that make it less advantageous to be a cheater. And we're living in an era we are giving all the advantage to cheaters. In every aspect of our lives, we watch people who do the wrong thing get benefits and do the right thing take it on the chin. And when we talk about like commercial or corporate taxes, right? This is a great example of the people who are honest lose and the people who are really good at lying win. When you have a system that's so used to people cheating, the system itself tries to like end around them and dance around the behaviors. which makes it incredibly hard for people who just follow the rules to even participate. In fact, if I just declared, like I don't know, before I had a really good accountant, I just put the number on the line that it said, right? I didn't have justifications, or I didn't have hiding things, or I didn't move money at the last minute to have tax advantage. So I didn't do the dance whatsoever. I was just legitimately. So I was probably paying about 40% more in taxes than I should have if I had a competent attorney or competent accountant. Well, accountants come around and they're like, oh no, all you got to do is this. This is what everybody does. Move your money here. Then it's not, counted as taxation, even though it is, it's really not. And then you don't have to pay that stuff. I'm like, well, why is that? Why is that dance even necessary? Why don't everybody just tell people what they make and pay the taxes that they are supposed to pay? And the problem is there's so much of human nature in the mix that the dance became so oppressive that you have to do the dance or you're going to overpay. So the dance makes it so that it's about equal, because the dance gets a little bit harder every time they create more moves in the dance. And then everybody has to do it. It's almost like, to be compliant, you have to do the effing dance. And if you don't, you're at a big disadvantage. And that's where we always go before we're like, hold on, this is stupid. You have Rand Paul, or maybe it was Rand Paul, that was taking the tax system that could be written on the front side of a single 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, right? The rest of it was like, that would be phenomenal. Because what would happen? What would happen if the tax code was on a piece of paper? You just put the number that you made, and the dance would lower itself because everybody was being more honest, so they didn't have to juice up the margins to capture the people who were doing the dance. They could lower the margins and just take the percentage that everybody's in agreement with that everybody should pay. And again, there would be fringe dancers, the people who would take advantage of circumstance to be able to pay a little bit less, but it would be harder to, and it actually give the advantage back to the rule followers. But, our system gets corrupt to a point where when it's the majority, you can't battle against it. It is just impossible to win that game. And that's where we are in taxation. That's where we are in government. That's where we are in elections. That's where we're in healthcare. That's where in banking. All of the things are too sophisticated and compromised to make them good again. What the hell is keeping government away from a flat tax? Think about the compliance. Like, I don't know if many of you out there have ever gone through a tax season. Most of you walk up to a free tax thing, you take your W-2, you put in your numbers, maybe you take a couple of tax incentives that it recommended, and you file it. It takes about, 30 minutes in an evening? That's not my experience. I spend about a month doing what took you 30 minutes. So there are services, there are entire industries that have taken advantage of how complicated the tax code is. You make it one page. Guess what? You don't ever, 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 ever need again. You don't need those accountants. So you immediately shrink an entire industry overnight. Think about the job loss. Think about the services that no longer have to be rendered. So I think that industry is being heavily protected against simplifying something that should be simple for the sake that you would have a major disaster in that industry. That's my, that is my gut reaction to that. The second one is that the worse it is, the more politicians make. The people who say flat tax that have no intentions of actually implementing a flat tax, they can run on that whole flat tax thing for the rest of their career. They might be able to put 2 million votes in their ballot box simply by always perpetually being in favor of something and never actually doing anything to get a flat tax. If you made a direct vote, and I think the worst thing in the world is to have individuals be able to vote, but this is one thing that if you were like, hey, this November on the ballot is going to be a national deal, right? You're going to vote on whether or not you think, regular person, there should just be a flat tax. What do you think the for versus against is going to be for the flat tax? I bet you 80-20. I bet you 80% of the people will say, absolutely. Some in that group won't know enough about it, but that sounds good. But some people who do know about it will be like, I've been waiting for this my whole life. We don't have to have legislatures that are going to promise this every freaking election cycle and never come through. We're just going to freaking do it. So in with flat tax, you have term limits. You have divesting, if you're a politician or in any position of power, having conflict of interest rules that make it so that you, your family, or people, or your acquaintances can't prosper from the information that you you get in the normal deal. All of these 100% would pass if we're allowed for the people to vote on these things directly, because they are so popular. But even better, if you're a 10% of the public, or 10% of the legislature who would vote for that, you could run on that forever. So you can see why if the 20-year-old version of yourself, if you went back and interviewed them and said, hey, what are politicians promising? What is the biggest problems of the day? What do you think politics should be able to solve by the time that you're 40, right? I bet you the shit that you're talking about today is the same shit that was going on, just at a magnitude level of peril. It's the same stuff, promised the same way, but never able to be solved. So anyway, that was my rant for today. I just wanted to do about an hour, give you guys a chance to hear from Youngstown Studio even the day after Christmas Eve, because AMO Bros didn't show up. It's not even really, there's no danger outside. I think the last time that they were a no-show, it was because they were afraid the snow and it was dangerous. Today it's just a day they probably ate too much and feel like sitting home playing Xbox. That's my official charge. But when they do come up, if they ever come back, there's a bunch of stuff to talk about. We have we have a masterful post by elected mayor of Youngstown, Derek McDowell. And here's my true feelings on Mr. Derek. And we'll be sure to talk about this again on Tuesday. But I've known Derek for many years, and he is a stand-up dude. He has a great personality. And if I took all the people that I knew who would make good politicians, Derek would not be on the top 50 of my list. And the only thing, like, I think he's smart enough to do the job. He has the capacity to do the job really well. He is not a freaking politician, right? He's a doer. He's a guy that knows how to get shit done. And I don't ever equate getting stuff done with politics. And you take Youngstown politics, which is the worst breed of politics that you can get. I would rather you go to any other mayorship than the city of Youngstown. Maybe not Detroit, maybe not Los Angeles, maybe not New York, other very difficult populations to govern. But this is a hard one. And so one of the first... No, I'm not picking up, Isaac. If you can't show up here in your person, your voice is not welcomed here. So you could stay in the chat and I'll read your chat. But yeah, phone lines, they're closed for now because of you didn't show up. I feel like I have a text that says, oh, we're going to show up on Friday. And then nobody showed. So I'm a little mad. So anyway, back to Mr. Derek. So what I thought he would really struggle with is, number one, he's an entrepreneur. So he's used to just being able to pull the lever and something getting done. And when you're in politics, you have to have cooperation from people, right? So the people that you surround yourself in your cabinet, the positions that you fill, are really important that they know everything about what you're going to get done, and they are on board, and they will be loyal to you. They won't work against you, and they have the same level of integrity that you do. And in politics, it is so easy to capture a politician, because when you get elected for something, you have interest that just gang tackle you, right? They want your ear. They want you to be able to tell you what to do, and or not just tell you what to do, but suggest that you do things that benefit them. So I would imagine that his phone rings about 20 times an hour with somebody who's like, hey, dude, I heard you're the mayor. How about doing this? Do me a solid here, right? And I will tell you, I have Derek's number. I have a great relationship with Derek. How many things do you think I've asked of Derek at this point, right? I'm a member of the downtown community. I have a bunch of stuff that if he were in front of me, we would talk about. But you know what? I have not leveraged my relationship with him to make one single ask. I congratulated him. I told him that I really have high hopes for everything that he does, but there's not a single thing. I didn't say, hey, let's do lunch one day, or hey, I've got some things I want you to put on your whiteboard that now that you're my guy in there, that I want you to do my bidding. I didn't do one of those things because half of the discretion of having a person in position of power, a favor to be had, because I know that if I asked a favor from Derek, I could probably get my way, right? But I also know that I don't believe in corruption, and I don't want to get a better way than anybody else. I don't want to ever have something that I did because I knew someone. So I will, I'm going to ask him on the show next week. We're going to have his newest appointment that was kind of made the news. That I'd like to know his decision making that went into making that appointment. But you know what I'm not going to do? I'm not going to text him. I'm going to call his office and leave a message, and I want him to field my interview request just like everybody else's. And it's important to me that when you have integrity, that you pass on the opportunity to corrupt the system in the same way that you complain about it when somebody else does it. And I will stay true to that. Isaac, pointing out that the no-show for today, says, we definitely said we weren't coming in. You must have been drunk like every other Tuesday morning from 9 until 10. Well, cheers to you, my friend. And I'll have to check the text message. I could have read it wrong. I might have read it wrong. Let's see. Let's say me and Joe on December 26th. I think today's the 26th. I think that was Isaac that said that. Oh, he wasn't saying me and Joe doing the show on the 26th. He was commenting on some kind of picture. Yeah. All right. Isaac, listen. I will tell you I misread that. Me and Joe on December 26th meant to me that you and I were going to do the show here this morning. You made two posts, one or two messages. One was an image that I didn't read because I don't read those images. And then your commentary on the image that you just sent me that I didn't read. So I'll take responsibility. I assumed that you'll be here. Sorry for being super critical. Fred said they told me they wouldn't be in on Friday. Yeah, I just rectified that. I was harsher than I probably needed to be. Cock and balls. Thank you, Isaac. Appreciate that. Anyway, I think I'm gonna wrap it up here. No, I didn't finish Derek's stuff. So anyway, the most important part of the McDowell administration is going to be the people that he surrounds himself and how he picks those. So I'm most interested in the logic. I'm most interested in the logic of how he's making these appointments, because going into it, let's just say I were elected mayor, and I would have to weigh the best suited person for the job that might not be loyal to what I want to get done with the people who are loyal to me, but might not be the best person for the job. And that is a hard thing to choose. I had people in my mind when he was rolling out his, police, fire, parks and rec, all of these appointments. I was thinking, if it were me, who would I pick? And I only probably came up with maybe half of the people that were both loyal and the best person I thought would be for the job. The other people would be winovers, where I would have to see if they and I could get on the same page. And would I concede a little bit of ability for loyalty or vice versa? And that would be a really hard thing to do. So when I'm talking to him, these appointments, what went into the logic of how he made his selection and which side of that equation? Because I guarantee you are not going to get both everyone loyal and merited on your administration. And every one of the people who you make a compromise on has a high risk potential to working against everything you need to get done, which means that you're not an entrepreneur where you could just have your way and everybody has to do it. You now have to deal with the person that you hope comes through in the end. And, one of the appointments, the dude that was made the news. I had someone who I trust and respect say he's a great guy, and I have someone trust and respect saying that he's a terrible guy and a terrible appointment. But what I watched Derek do is say, we want change, we want all of this, and the haters are still going to hate. Well, welcome to politics, where you will always have 50% of the people out there that will be gunning for you because they hate every choice that you make, and there's no choice, even if they agree with it, they disagree with it. And you have the other half of the people, well, all right, third of the people will hate everything you do, a third of the people who don't know enough and don't care enough, and a third of the people who absolutely love everything you do. And you have to weigh each one of those groups. If you neglect any two of those groups, you're dead freaking meat. And now you're doing the dance instead of running a city. And we watched Mayor Brown, who was a very skilled politician, who survived his administration, didn't have really high highs and really didn't have low lows. And he was really good at mitigating his low lows with just enough high highs to make him completely neutral. And he could have been elected. I think he took his foot off the gas for this last couple of years. And because he got so knee deep into the downtown, something that should have lasted a year, lasted 17. And I think he had to take his foot off the gas because some of his spiking the football moments got undermined by things not panning out in the timeline that was necessary. And he lost enough steam that Derek took the opportunity. But I do think we've made it an upgrade for the mayor of Youngstown. And I think that he has the potential to do some really good things in spite of some of the appointments that he made. But, the next time I talk to him, I'm going to go full logic. I don't really care about anything else other than what went into those decisions. I will, most times when we interview a politician, their handlers want a what question are you going to ask them so they can be prepared. You're not going to get a gotcha moment and make them look bad. I mean, it's good politics to know what people are going to ask you. Derek's never done that with me. A couple times that I called him the mat on certain things, we talked about the things and, 50 other things. I think he's dynamic enough that he's never going to ask for what. But if I were to send him something, I'm going to say, share the plan with me, share the logic and what you're going to do, why you made those decisions and how you ended up there. And that will basically tell me everything I'm going to want to know. If he gives me metrics and measurements and spreadsheets about, what went into it, I can respect and appreciate that. If it's like, well, I got in there and I don't have a guy, so I went to this guy I trust, and that guy referred me to this guy. Now we've got in the deal of, the 6 degrees of people around you. You surround yourself by 6 people you implicitly trust not to stab you in the back. Any degree beyond that is completely out of your control. And trust yourself with that person, but don't trust yourself with the person that person handed you. And especially when it's in roles that can make or break your what you're capable of doing as mayor. Isaac says, suck my ass. And also, I love you too. So thank you for that contradiction. That is our relationship in a nutshell. So thank you, Isaac. All right, I'm out of here for today. Appreciate every you joining us on a Friday that the MLO Bros didn't show up on, but I filled in the gap, even if it was only for an hour. We'll catch you next time. See you on Monday. Have a great weekend.
Thank you for listening to this show on Youngstown Studio. This is original Youngstown content. Feel free to share our videos and tell your friends about us. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook. Thank you for your